Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Two Bros Wrestling Show. Once again, one bro this week. As you know, last week we did our Crown Jewel preview. Today, our main event topic is Crown Jewel review. We're going to look at everything with the pay per view, including whether or not we recommend it, think you should watch it, and then we're going to go match by match, talking winners and losers and the storylines coming out. Doug, obviously, last week we informed you of many of his predictions, most of which were wrong, including the fact that Logan Paul is not your world champion, which obviously has left him extremely disappointed and therefore unable to join us this week. But never fear, Doug will be back soon. And until then, let's go ahead and get kicked off as we always do. We got news. Opening bell time. Folks, we've typically been opening with a recurring story, that being Larry the Dog, CM Punk, the Elite, all the all-out media scrum fallout. We do have a brief update we'll give on that here a little later on, but instead of this normal way we've kicked off our show for what seems like forever now, let's actually go to the bigger story, that one that actually overshadows even the all-out media scrum, that being the fall of Vince McMahon. We do have some updates and news for you regarding Vince McMahon's ouster from earlier this year. And that is that World Wrestling Entertainment said on Wednesday that the special committee investigating this alleged misconduct and secret payments by former CEO Vince to a variety of individuals, mostly women, to not rat on many of the let's just say indiscretions that Mr. McMahon was having through the many years. But the special committee is now complete and has been disbanded, according to what the company said in its security filings. So management is working with board of directors, is what the quote then goes on to say, to implement the recommendations of the special committee related to this investigation. Now, what does that mean? We do not know. There was no indication as to what those recommendations by the board of directors were and how they will be implemented. Once we find out more about what this may be, what the ramifications are for WWE, we will let you know. As you know, Vince McMahon is still the majority stakeholder in WWE, and his daughter, Stephanie McMahon, is co-CEO. So in this security filing, the board was fairly blunt and honest by saying, and this is another quote directly from the filing, is Mr. McMahon can effectively exercise control over our affairs. Essentially, I believe your board is letting you know that, yes, we found the misconduct, we've concluded everything, yet any sort of repercussions or punishments that we would derive from this information is very likely to be scuttled by the McMahon family because they're still pretty much in charge of what it is that we do. So, again, stay tuned. We will let you know if anything does come of this. Apparently, at this point in time, there is no further, at least on the WWE side of things, no further investigating. The government, on the other hand, may have different plans, and those plans are not going to be so easy for the McMahon family to run from if that does in fact happen. One thing that is certainly happening is that with the special committee now drawing this investigation to a close, the money is out the door, and $18 million is what we had in this filing. That was from this last quarter. WWE reported that $18 million was spent on this special investigation. And that brings total, drum roll, $19.4 million on the probe that throughout the course of the year. So you're getting into the territory of the amount of money that Vince paid out of his personal finances to make all these women go away. So biggest story of the year, despite everything that CM Punk and the Elite tried, Vince McMahon and being outed from his company still takes the cake. We do have related news. In that security filing, we have some financials to report also on WWE because WWE is bucking trends, folks. I know you hear every day on the news, just like I do, that these are bad economic times, but not for the WWE. The broader market trends this year have been downward. In WWE stock, at least as Monday this past week, it was hit a 52-week high, 50% higher than it was for most of 2022, trading at levels that hadn't been seen since 2019. So we're talking pre-pandemic. The S&P 500, by comparison, is down more than 20%. So if you look at all the other major stocks, you're talking a 20% decrease, and WWE instead has seen a 50% bump in their stock price. How is WWE bucking this larger market trend? Well, it's a confluence of a lot of different things, sort of a perfect storm for WWE right now. Obviously, they have some improved media contracts that they are reaping the benefits of. They've come roaring back from basically a dead business model, with live performing being something that for a couple of years could not happen. And the live part of their business has come back after the pandemic. And then there is Vince's exit. And it's not to be underestimated, the fact that Vince's exit, it's not a repudiation of Vince per se, in that, oh, investors feel more comfortable with him being gone. No, in fact, the real nugget of truth in this Vince being gone and why that might affect the stock price is more along the lines of, I think that most probably thought Vince, while holding on to his company, would never ever sell. And now with Vince gone, the likelihood of a sale has increased tremendously, and is quite the rumor all the time now when it comes to speculation on the future of WWE stock, is the fact that a sale is imminent. And what does that mean? Within the next year or two imminent, or just even further down the road? Who knows? But we will continue to follow this. If you have WWE stock and are such a wrestling fan that all your stock is just wrestling stock, then kudos to you, because you're doing better than everyone else. Hopefully your retirement, your kids' college fund, everything else is wrapped up in WWE right now, because it's about the only thing making any money. And now a reality check. Next news story. So if the new regime at WWE and all of its rehires had you thinking that the business was stabilizing and that the frequent layoffs that we have all seen over the last couple of years were a thing of the past, well, think again. 5 NXT talent have been released in what appears to be budget trimming prior to the holidays, which had become a very common occurrence in WWE. You tend to have those layoffs right before the holidays and then right after WrestleMania. And it appears that this must be a holdover from the Vince days. Just because there's a regime change doesn't mean that these layoffs will still not happen on occasion. Now, the 5 that were released were mostly upstarts who had not yet made much of a mark, or had been most have not been prominently featured on WWE programming. The notable exception to that is Bodie Hayward, who was a member of Andrew Chase's faction, central character in the ongoing Chase University storyline. And the reports are that, without being overly specific, that Bodie was a handful backstage. So his release may not be as related to the others who probably were being let go only because they had not shown the progress or the potential that maybe they did at one point in time. Bodie, who obviously was showing progress well enough to be featured prominently on television, apparently had some issues behind the scenes that might have fostered a bad relationship with those in NXT leadership positions. But in addition to Bodie, those being let go this past week include Sloane Jacobs, Erica Yan, Daenerys Griffin, and Ru Feng. So most of those had either not made TV or had only been featured sporadically or on Level Up, the sort of NXT 3.0, if you will. In other news, instead of goings, let's talk some coming backs. What do you say? Sasha Banks is still under WWE contract. We've not mentioned Sasha on this show in a while, but as soon as Vince got the boot, the rumors began to surface that maybe the boss would make her way back to our televisions. That day may now be much closer. And I know for a while it seemed like maybe that relationship was permanently strained. But Dave Meltzer has reported that Banks was a WWE guest at a show in Mexico City this past week. And she was said to be hanging out with Bayley and AAA wrestler Mamba. And Mamba took them all out to a restaurant and bar afterwards. And this sort of WWE sanctioned appearance by Sasha comes on the heels of Banks last week appearing on the red carpet with the New Day for the premiere of Black Panther. So appearing in public with other WWE talent representing the company, even if it's a tangible representation of the company, is a good sign that Banks may appear on our TV screens again soon. Let's hope so. We're big fans of Sasha around here. And now that update on the Bucks and CM Punk that I either promised and or warned you about, depending on how tired you are of hearing of this story. But last week, we reported on the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega appearing in a video package. That occurred again this week. An additional video package aired on Dynamite. However, we now know that the trio has also been backstage as well. So this is further evidence of an imminent return. Meanwhile, Colt Cabana made a surprise appearance on AEW Dynamite this past Wednesday, which further it cements that you're not going to see CM Punk back on AEW television anytime soon because of the history between those two and how in some ways much of this fallout from the fight and everything that led up to it, the comments made, all relate back to 6-7 years ago and the fractured relationship between Punk and Colt Cabana that Punk cannot seem to get over. And Colt Cabana being welcomed back onto the main programming of AEW might be Tony Khan's under the radar way of showing fans that I am Team Cabana and I am washing my hands of CM Punk. And rumors are still that they are continuing to work on a buyout of Punk's contract. As soon as that's finalized, we'll let you know. Obviously, we continue to follow this story as it continues as well. Moving on. Over the last few months, we've watched the Hulu WWE saga play out in regards to WWE's next day streaming rights. We even gave an update on this last week. And now we have even more clarity. The two sides have come to a short-term agreement that will allow them to continue the relationship until the end of this year while they continue to negotiate during this time. Giving them more time to sort things out. The reports are that WWE would like to renew both their deals at the same time, which of course would make negotiations easier and easier for them to keep up with. Essentially what you have right now is you have one deal for the USA Universal shows, which runs until the end of the year now because of this extension. And then there's the separate deal that they have because of SmackDown airing on Fox. Now that deal runs until somewhere towards the end of 2023. So these time frames are not lining up currently, but the short-term deal with Hulu that they sounds like they're in good faith hoping that this deal would continue because it not only includes the next day airing rights of the USA Universal shows, but it also has some new content. Apparently there is a reality series involving Bianca Belair and Montez Ford that will be part of this new short-term agreement to air on Hulu. Now, I'm sure Peacock is probably disappointed. I'm sure that they had hoped that they would be bringing all of WWE programming under their roof, but apparently WWE is perfectly fine with the current relationship. Obviously, 2 contracts means 2 fee negotiations, and the word is that apparently WWE is just fine with having both their live and next day streaming content being with separate masters. So maybe there will be no need to worry and everything will continue as it currently is between Peacock having all the live events in the archive and Hulu maintaining the next day streaming rights. We will see when that's finalized, but at least until the end of the year, there will be no change. And then finally, congratulations to Sheamus. Sheamus, the Irish warrior, he tied the knot this past weekend, or last weekend rather, in New York City in a wedding that was very Instagram worthy. If you're a wrestling fan, seeing all the photos and seeing all the AEW and WWE talent intermingling, something we do not see or even think of a whole lot. You think of these two sides being enemies, but obviously the bonds in the wrestling business are thick and people bounce back and forth. So you have Miro and Claudio Castagnoli as part of the wedding party there for Sheamus. And then you have best man Drew McIntyre there playing the bagpipes. So best of luck to the newlyweds. And with that, everyone, that is the opening bell. That takes us to our main event, and that is a review of Crown Jewel. Now, we usually start these reviews by just giving you the bottom line as to whether or not you should or should not watch it without giving any spoilers. So if you've not seen Crown Jewel, you're on the fence about whether or not you should watch it. Before we start talking winners and losers and what happened in each match, let's just give the bottom line. Honestly, Crown Jewel, it has in the past been a skippable premium live event. They were not very monumental. They very rarely had a whole lot of news come out that was worthwhile. And so it was oftentimes that one, if you were going to skip a pay-per-view, that could be the one to do. Here lately, WWE has made a concerted effort to try to improve and make them seem more than Crown Jewel seem more than just your glorified house show that happens to be airing on television. Did they do that this time? I think that they've made a lot of improvements over the last couple. And while I will say that the action in general was still on the higher side compared to what we maybe have seen or gotten used to in the past, there really wasn't a whole lot monumental coming out of this one. So I think this was actually one of the more skippable Crown Jewel events that they have probably had in some time. So if you only have a little bit of time and want to get caught up on what happened on Crown Jewel, maybe at least watch the women's matches, and we'll get to the why on those here in a little bit. Despite how women and female performers are treated while they are in the country of Saudi Arabia, the women stole the show this time around, almost up and down the card. Outside of that, pretty skippable pay-per-view overall. Decent action. So definitely, if you have a lot of time, you will not be offended by anything that you watch. Watch it. It's wrestling. Enjoy it. If you're short on time, catch those women's matches and check out our review right here. So let's start with match number one. I got my notes here. Lashley versus Lesnar is how they started. I believe this is the one that I don't know if I actually even gave this part of Doug's prediction. I think Doug thought this one was going to go to a 1 hour time limit draw, which did not happen. Surprise, surprise. I will say that the only other encounter that these two had prior to this weekend's event was the Royal Rumble contest, and that was just a taste. And they do have good chemistry together, and the fact that they have kept this a little separate, and the fact that Lesnar has been so much a part of the Roman Reigns story of the last year and a half, I think that this just felt fresh to me. And it was one of the matches I was most looking forward to. The crowd was hot from the beginning, which is something that used to not be the case with these Crown Jewel events, but has been a signature of these events here lately. I do not know if there's less royal family there and actual more fans there, or if the concerted efforts that WWE is taking to try to make inroads into Saudi Arabia are working, and they are actually creating actual WWE fans and not folks that are just there to see what this might be all about. But the crowd was hot, and that's good, and it definitely benefited the event compared to the sterile feel of the first three or so Crown Jewel events. Lesnar in the full Nelson. So Bobby Lashley had Lesnar in a full Nelson, and I thought this was interesting. Normally when you see them working a rest hold like this, you'll have the fake struggle or no when asked to give up or never or something like that. It was interesting that Lesnar in a very full sentence very plainly says, no, I don't want to give up. I'm not sure if I found that funny or just refreshing because it was different, but either way, it was something that stood out to me. And I also think that, what stood out to me is the amount of offense that Bobby Lashley got in on this one. Brock Lesnar was your winner. I said we're going to talk winners and losers now, so we're in spoiler territory, which is the right call. It's what I called for last week because I believe after always taking the L for Roman Reigns over their last couple of encounters, it was time for for Lesnar to get a little bit of his monster shine back here. and that had to be at Bobby Lashley's expense. But the way they did it was to give Lashley a lot of offense. In fact, Lesnar, who rarely is made to look weak, at times looked like vulnerable here to Bobby Lashley. So there was also a quick pin where Lesnar took that full Nelson that I mentioned a few moments ago and basically just fell backwards onto Lashley. And that was sort of a cheap pin that Lesnar got out of it, looking like he was lucky to escape with the win, which makes me think that this is pointing to a match down the road. And if this is only the second time that they've really had an encounter like this, then I'm for it. Let's do it again because it was good. It was a good WWE big man style match, and it was good really all the way up until what was kind of a cheap finish, but maybe an understandable finish, and maybe also a reason why this match was first on and not later on down the card. This is when things really started getting good. As I said, the women really stole the show for me on this crown jewel. And it starts with this next match. And it was a rematch for the women's tag team titles. And it was the newly crowned champions, just won them on Raw this past week. Alexa and Asuka versus Damage Control. Damage Control are your winners here. So the belts revert back. There is some head scratching as to why you would bother to make the change. Just to switch them back, especially in an event that tends to have a lot of baby faces go over because these are goodwill in many ways. These are goodwill ambassador type visits to Saudi Arabia. So a lot of times you see the bad guys losing more often than not. But what we got as far as the match goes, quibble all you want about the outcome or the title switch or the frequency of the title switch, but the action was good. I did note here in my notes, first thing, a lot of clothes. And that is not a sexist way of saying I wish that they were not in as many clothes. It's just the double standard is very obvious when you see the men who obviously wrestle in what's practically their underwear, managing to keep the same gear and outfits that you would be used to them on any other card from any other area of the world. And yet the women come out covered pretty much neck to toe, showing once again that it's hard sometimes for me. I get taken out of the moment just a bit when I see them dressed so differently than they normally would be on TV. Is just that stark reminder that while, yes, it's progress in some ways to see that this is even being allowed to happen, but the fact that it has to be part of the story that they are still unequal to the men, it just makes that uncomfortable as to whether or not we should be having these events, whether or not WWE should be maintaining these relationships, right? But clothing aside, we had early on we had early on the announcers, both of them mentioned the history of these particular four women in NXT, and I thought it was interesting that both Michael Cole as well as Wade Barrett, one used down there when referring to NXT, and the other used down in NXT. Why did this stand out to me? I just think it's an interesting holdover to the old territory days. Instead of saying this was their history in NXT, they're still referencing the geographic location of where NXT is in Florida, which is kind of how wrestling operated for most of its history. Is, you went up north, that means you went to WWE. Down south, you're probably talking the Mid-Atlantic, or deep south, you're probably talking either Mid-South Wrestling or Championship Wrestling from Florida. So it's just interesting that that type of vernacular still bleeds into the commentary from time to time. The live feed crapped out on me at one point during this match, and I don't normally have the same kind of peacock troubles that Doug has, but it got me this time, so I had to quickly adjust from the TV to the phone, and I didn't miss much of the action here. And actually, I was able to rewind, which is the first time I've ever noticed being able to rewind a live event using Peacock, which is something that was commonplace with the WWE Network. I could start a pay-per-view late and still catch up. And since they moved to Peacock, that hasn't been the case. So maybe some things are changing, but I don't know, but I will say for this one event, I was actually able to rewind. So great action from all four involved. I really like the ending, Nikki Cross interfering. Normally I don't care so much for interference, but storyline wise, if you're going to make this switch, Nikki Cross, not a superhero, but actual Nikki Cross, it makes sense to do it this way because there is a long history between Nikki Cross and Alexa, best friends from back in the day. That falls apart. And then they sort of swept the feud to the side without actually really bringing it to a logical conclusion. Asuka goes and does her Bray Wyatt light gimmick there for a bit. Nikki becomes a superhero, and they never really had that feud that you would have expected them to have, considering how close they were for all the time. Maybe we get the intensity from a more physical, a more serious Nikki Cross, and it might actually give Alexa something more to do, who has kind of been wasted for a little bit, and it's nice to maybe see her have something that she can more sink her teeth into. But overall, this was very good back and forth action, and planted the seeds for a Cross and a Bliss feud, which I think we need. Next up, Drew McIntyre versus Karrion Kross in a steel cage match. No, Doug's prediction didn't come true. Jeff Hardy did not intervene with a swanton off the top rope, and Karrion Kross, though he lost, is at least to my knowledge, not returning in his gladiator gear. So Doug got that one wrong. Drew McIntyre wins. Actually, a bit of a surprise. I really thought that Karrion Kross probably needed this early. This is still early on in the Karrion Kross rebuild, and it seemed like Triple H has been so high on Kross that I thought he might walk away with this one. Let's talk about the action, though, that did happen to get Drew to the end. I will say it's strange to see, and I know this relates back to what I just was talking about in the prior match with the women, but Scarlett, of all people, who is probably the least conservatively dressed of all the women that you'll see on your Monday night screens, to see Scarlett so conservatively dressed, it's just odd. Again, highlighting the hypocrisy and the double standards at play when in the country there. It was an impressive Mikanoshu driver that Drew got on a man the size of Karrion Kross. I also really liked the strength demonstrated by Drew, the core strength. He was hanging upside down in the turnbuckle. Karrion was on top. Drew, without using his arms, manages to fully pull himself all the way up to drag Kross off the top rope. Great core strength demonstrated there. There was a very scary looking, but a good looking superplex from the cage. I think that was probably the spot of this whole match. And then obviously there's a lot of Scarlett interference throughout this whole thing. Despite the cage, she manages to make her presence felt, and she makes herself, there towards the end. Drew nearly escapes through the door. She maces him in the face. She maces the outside referee. It was a believable false finish for Karrion. Obviously not meant to be. Went to the very standard, very typical steel cage ending where you have one man crawling for the door while the other man is crawling out the outside. Who's going to make it to the floor first? Drew McIntyre is your winner. Obviously, this isn't as decisive as a pin or something that would maybe preclude this from having another chapter. I think they showed good enough chemistry that maybe we go with another chapter, but we'll see. Overall, maybe a little plotting at times, and I hate to say this, I'm a huge Karrion Kross fan. I like the character. I love him on the mic. I like the presentation, the intro, the way that he and Scarlett work together. I say all that to say, if there is a negative, occasionally his matches can be a little plotting. This was either at times plotting or pretty good. It was either or. But overall, this one was just okay, and maybe a bit of a surprise in who was the winner. And that moves us on to Judgment Day versus the OC. And got this prediction right, and it was just because it's the right way to go, and that being the Judgment Day this early on in not just the faction, but this early on in Dom's heel turn, that they needed some credibility in a win. I thought it was interesting. I put this in my notes. Cole called Rhea Ripley seductive, and I only mentioned this because it was the exact same word that he used to describe Scarlett in just the match that was on right before this. So I don't know. Maybe it's because he's in Saudi Arabia, but hopefully Michael Cole got that cold shower that he needed. But using those repeats twice there in a row, there was a bit of sloppiness to this one actually, which is maybe a bit surprising considering who's involved. But maybe on the other hand, not surprising when you have 6 people in the ring. That makes things automatically a little chaotic. There was a bad looking attempt at a tag. By Gallows having to short arm. They were way too close to the corner, and there's no way a man the size of Gallows couldn't have reached out and made that tag. So it kind of looked ridiculous, him having to pretend like he could not quite make it there. There was also a weird moment where Finn Balor just in the background on my TV screen just rolls across the ring into the outside. I don't know if he took a move or was selling a move that actually didn't get thrown or what. Maybe he was wrestling an invisible man. I have no idea if it was a pantomime, but you go back and watch. There is a moment there towards the middle to end of the match where Finn Balor just throws himself to the outside for no real obvious reason that I could see. But I need to go back and see that one myself just to see if it was as funny as it was to me when I was making these notes live. No surprise here that Rhea begins to interfere, and that's what ends up helping with the pin. Again, chaotic because of multiple people involved. Not that big a fan, really, of 6-man contests for that reason. Not a lot of selling, but also never any down spots either. So even though it was a bit sloppy, a bit chaotic, it was never anything other than exciting and fun, and the crowd was really into it, which you also have to take into consideration as well. And that leads us to the match that Doug had famously said was going to be the one he was most looking forward to on the night, that being Omos versus Braun Strowman. Of course, we have to start this match between two giants with them coming face to face and doing a long, protracted stare down just to highlight the size of these two men and the height difference. And I will say that it is interesting and surprising when you see someone the size of Braun Strowman actually pale in comparison to the size of someone like Omos. But once that was out of the way, I guess what we got is what we got, right? Probably on the higher side of what could be expected for these two, but not much different than what you probably thought going in this match would be. Braun Strowman, as predicted, as we predicted on the show last week, did walk away with your win. There was more offense, I will say, given to Omos than I would have expected, which maybe might make one think that Triple H sees more in him than we maybe at first thought. We all knew what Vince thought of the big man. Omos had not been featured so prominently under the Triple H regime, which would make one naturally think that maybe Triple H was doing some course correction. However, the fact that he went out his way to protect Omos in this situation makes me think that maybe Triple H does have some thoughts and some plans for what we can do with Omos from here. No doubt about it, though, that Braun Strowman has to move on to something else, and he was going to pick up the win in this. I will say the finish was nice. Again, not like we were expecting a wrestling clinic from these two big men, but it was a true power show when you see Braun Strowman legitimately struggle to get a man the size of Omos up into a running power slam, which was pretty impressive. So again, fine, high end of what was expected. Right guy goes over. Next match, we have the tag team champs, the Usos versus the Brawling Brutes. No one does joint manipulation like Pete Dunne. Sorry, can't call him Butch, but no one does joint manipulation like Dunne, and it was something that he put on full display here. A nice power display by Ridge, who normally I'm just kind of apathetic about, but he actually had some nice moments in this one that might be making me change my opinion. Might have to reevaluate, but he had one Uso on each shoulder, and it was pretty nice. And then he did a Sheamus tribute. Sheamus obviously had been written off because of an injury storyline, but as we mentioned in our news segment, he really is off because he is on his honeymoon. And there was the bells of the Bowery like punches that Ridge did in tribute to their mentor. I thought that was good. The Usos did the double splash, and I don't know that anyone does the double splash from the top rope quite as well as they do. It always looks good. It looked good here. And apparently Usi is lost in translation in Saudi Arabia because we had an Usi chant. Thank you, Sami Zayn. I liked that. And then there was the creative finish where we had the 1D-like maneuver I can't remember what it is they call it, but from the top rope to secure the win in what was a one of the better contests of the night. Even though nothing consequential happened as far as storyline purposes, I think this is probably to an end. I doubt there's a rematch at play here. I think the Usos are going to move on in the Bloodline storyline here. We got War Games coming up, obviously, but maybe there is more juice down the line, and maybe there is an opportunity for the Brawling Brutes at some point to have a run with those world titles. But obviously, the whole title scene is tied up in the Bloodline right now. And then we get to what I think is going to be the match of the night for most of you. If you watch, I said watch the women's matches, the tag match that we mentioned earlier, and this is where I to me, this was the best match on the card. It is the last woman standing match, the first time that there's been a stipulated women's contest in the country of Saudi Arabia at any of these Crown Jewel events. You had your champion, Bianca Belair, steal your champion against Bayley. I predicted this one actually the other way. I thought if there was going to be a major title switch, and I know we had the tag title switch earlier, but when I did the predictions on that last week, those titles were not even on the card and had not even changed yet. So as far as the champions go, there's nothing that has changed between this Sunday and last Sunday. The only thing we had changed was the re-switching things back to the way they were before Raw on Monday. But Bianca Belair has had a lengthy title reign at this point, so I thought maybe this was an opportunity to do a title switch, but perhaps they want to save this for an American event, and maybe they had some concern about too many heels going over in the country of Saudi Arabia, where, as we mentioned earlier, they tend to favor baby faces. So Bianca Belair is your winner here. It was an impressive walk of the barrier at a certain point in the match that Bayley does, and it showed some great athleticism. On the other hand, she also was involved in one of the least graceful spots of the night, and there was an awkward fall where she came off the edge of the platform in a way that I don't believe was intended, and they were able to cover for it by pretending that she was playing possum. But there was a lengthy stretch there where the referee was obviously telling Bianca Belair to back off, and I don't believe that it didn't appear anyways that it was just part of the match. It was not the layout, because the fall off the edge of the stage really looked like a slip. Either she sold it incredibly well, or she hurt herself, recovered, and then covered up for that fact by attacking Belair, making it look like she was using the referee to play some possum. There was a stiff chair that was thrown into Bayley's face by Bianca. When Bianca was in the ring, Bayley up on the turnbuckle, so that chair traveled a long ways to meet the face of Bayley there. There was also a really stiff Bayley to belly that was delivered to Belair on the stage. Looked really cool. There was some creative use of the road case. I thought that the two ladies pulled off while also up on the stage. Maybe less graceful was the beginnings, at least, of the golf cart spot. I think that this was not a Sammy Guevara-esque moment where dude legitimately gets thrown after being struck by a moving golf cart at high speeds. This was meant to look like it was a high-speed impact getting ready to come, but Bianca pretty much had to stand there for a long period of time, and Bayley way slowed down on that golf cart, and so that part didn't look good. They made up for it, though, by fighting up on top of the golf cart, which is where Bayley ends up by herself while Bianca drives her to the ring. All of that was a really great-looking visual that kind of made up for a little bit of the roughness later. To come off of that golf cart, though, Belair tried to move that was to put Bayley through a couple of tables that were set up, and Bayley instead just smacked the heck out of her back, and the tables did not break. She just sort of caught it on the edge, which is obviously way more painful and way worse than if you'd have gone completely and flush through the tables themselves. So rough looking landing there for Bayley, not breaking those tables. And then later on, she had another rough one on the chair, a chair set up in the ring, and she was to be slammed on it, and her knee really did look like it caught the back of the chair pretty snugly there. But these women were working stiff. There was this amazing 450 splash attempt that Belair tried from the top rope. Bayley moved out of the way. Belair hits the chairs. So they worked hard. It was a creative finish where Bayley was trapped, unable to answer the 10 count because she was trapped within the ladder that had been secured underneath the turnbuckle, which rendered her unable to maneuver herself out and to get up before the referee's count of 10. All in all, this was the match of the night. Both women worked extremely hard. Both women worked extremely stiff. They had a lot of creative spots. If you had one match that you had to go see from this night, this would be the one. What's next for Bayley, though? Good question. Felt like a blow off. I know that I thought Bayley might be taking the title in this one. And I think that at this point, damage control has been neutralized pretty much by Bianca Belair, and now Bayley has taken several pins to Bianca, including one for the title now. I don't know if we get another match out of this one. Maybe the Bianca moves on to other things, and if so, then they'll need to rebuild Bayley a little bit because Bayley hasn't been back all that long. And then leading this faction, she needs something to get her heel heat back. So we'll see where this lands for Bayley next. Then you have the penultimate segment of the night, and that was Bray Wyatt. I will say that his, the only thing he was advertised for was an appearance to do something supernatural and spooky. And I don't know that it really delivered on that. I think it was just a way to get a very popular character right now on the card and to Saudi Arabia for the live crowd. The drone images, that's what I was getting ready to start with when I was going to give him credit for something. The drones above the stadium forming the white lotus looking moth thing, whatever it is. That looked really cool. Outside of that, it was solid work from Bray, but not anything that has been any, he is in the process of becoming whatever this next iteration of his character is going to be. We just continued in that progression. So it wasn't anything so must see, over the top. Wow, I can't believe Bray Wyatt did this, that, or the other. It was pretty much in line with what you've been seeing on Raw and SmackDown, just furthering that progression of his character involvement, which takes us to our main event. And it's strange to even say this was the main event because I really thought there was a chance that either it was going to be on earlier or that this main event would transition into something else. Maybe a new opponent coming out, maybe a Money in the Bank cash in, something other than reality star turned professional wrestler Logan Paul. I guess maybe more social media / reality star. But anyway, Logan Paul taking on your Tribal Chief. Again, Doug's not here because he's so disappointed. Big Logan Paul fan. I'm hoping that Doug recovers well enough to join us next week. I'll try to talk to him afterwards and try to encourage him that this Logan Paul kid may still have a future, but he's not going to get the Logan Paul RuPaul match that he had hoped for at WrestleMania. Sorry, Doug. But it does look like we're going to be going into WrestleMania season as we've all thought for the longest period of time with your Tribal Chief. Spoiler alert, folks. Yes, Roman Reigns is still your champion. We all saw that coming, right? The crowd was solidly behind Roman at the start, which is maybe a bit surprising, maybe not what WWE would have hoped for. But, I say at the start. We'll get to a little bit of that later. They did a lot of tricks, as you might expect for a match like this, to draw out something into more of a main event feel for a guy who really doesn't have a lot of experience up to this point. So there was a lot of pomp and circumstance to the entrances. There was a lot of running at first, to avoid contact, one running from the other, vice versa. Interference, you had a lot of moving parts, a lot of outsiders making their way over time. Logan Paul's entourage, Logan Paul's brother, the Usos, just a lot of things to keep maybe it from looking like right in the middle of the ring. Here's this one-on-one action where one guy's extremely green and the other guy really benefits from working with someone who is at a certain level to make everybody look good. And what we got was maybe a bit more offense than you would have expected. Maybe even more offense. I should say this, more offense than I think is advisable. And they did a good job. If you were going to go this route, they did a good job leading up to the match, making it seem like Logan Paul did not have a chance outside of anyone can get lucky with a punch. and he has had some boxing experience, and one of the best boxers in the world had given him credit for being as tough as he was in the ring. Maybe he'd get that one lucky punch. If you played the matchup like you played the build up to the match, it probably would have worked for me better. Instead, it wasn't waiting around or playing up that, oh, he got the lucky punch, will he get the 3 count? Logan Paul shouldn't be getting this many 2.5 counts on someone as dominant as Roman Reigns. If you were going to make this match go long, maybe it wouldn't have been entertaining to the live crowd. I get that. But if you were going to have this match go long, maybe just have Roman Reigns playing with his food, right? Like, just this should have been a squash match. There's no way that these two are legitimate neck and neck competitors. Have him get in that lucky punch, maybe get the 2 count there, but there were repeated 2 counts. There was a top rope blockbuster. There was a lot of moves where it looked like Roman Reigns was in jeopardy to Logan Paul, and maybe that makes for a more entertaining main event, but I don't know in the long run if it doesn't do a bit of damage to the Roman Reigns mystique. That's what I hear in my notes. Logan Paul should never get a 2 count on Roman. I still stand by that. I will give credit where it's due. Paul performed at a high level, which, we saw at WrestleMania that he does have athletic ability. And I will say that by the end, he won the crowd over. I mentioned at the start that the crowd was truly anti-Paul to begin with. By the end, when they had some believable near falls, whether they were advisable or not, the crowd ate them up, and it got them in Logan Paul's corner. I will also say that doing the dive from the top turnbuckle to the outside of the ring through the table while holding a cell phone to record a video that then later goes viral. The video does look pretty cool. So credit where it's due with all of that. It's just, is Logan Paul the right guy in this situation? So bottom line, they made the match entertaining as opposed to making it realistic. So you could say that, should they have? Lots of questionable things here. You can start from questionable. Should we be having these Saudi Arabia events anyway? That's obviously a broader topic. But should Logan Paul have been in a main event? And if he was, shouldn't it have been a squash? Shouldn't this been on earlier in the card and been a squash as opposed to being a main event, and then have to give it a big main event feel by giving a social media star way more offense than they have any right to have on your dominant world champion of 3 years? That's my biggest complaints with this. And that is Crown Jewel. That is the review of Crown Jewel. Not a bad 3 hours and 20 minutes or so. It was on the longer side of the recent WWE Premium Live events. I don't know if they are if they are contracted to have so much time that they put into these with Saudi Arabia or not. So it was overly long and, for the most part, overly uneventful. If you check out anything, check out the women's tag team title match, and definitely go out of your way to check out Bianca Belair versus Bayley. Those two left it all in the ring. And with that, we're going to go to the big finish, folks. That is our 1, 2, 3. If this is your first time joining us on the Two Bros Wrestling Show, the 1, 2, 3 big finish is we give our match of the week, performer of the week, and our botch of the week, which is where we are going to start. Botch of the week, the aftermath of the opening contest on Dynamite this week. I'm fine for Jay Lethal and Darby Allin having a match. They worked well together. It was going fine, but the post-match was such a mess. Where Cole Carter, who was 2 dimes in NXT in the Mafia faction that NXT 2.0 was running at the time, he gets let go because of failing a drug test, and for whatever reason, this ends up being somebody that Tony Khan decides he's going to pick up for his broadcast. And now he's been worked into this storyline where fake Sting, 30 years after the original fake Sting, but there was fake Sting at ringside for this. And there was a collective shrug and crickets from the live crowd when the mask was revealed. And here stands Cole Carter, who most of the fan base does not really know yet. Or if you do know him, don't know him well enough or impressed enough to give a reaction. And that's not, I'm sure, what they were looking for. That's not the WWE defection that anybody would have hoped to have seen in that spot either, because what we have next is a 55-year-old Jeff Jarrett coming in, defecting from WWE to AEW. I know we all pop for these, signings where somebody who was unjustly let go from WWE shows up in AEW, be it a Keith Lee, be it a Swerve Strickland, even down the lower on the totem pole with folks that just never got a fair break, like an Andrade or I mean, there's so many. There's so many ways you can go, and now we're going to get Sting versus Jeff Jarrett 2022. I don't know. All the way around, that whole thing was a mess, and that is my botch of the week. Performer of the week. Let's give it up for Mandy Rose. What do you say? Mandy Rose was always had a good look. She was always good on the mic, generated legit heel heat, but no one really gave her a whole lot of credit for her in-ring work because, she came up through the Tough Enough system, and some folks look up on that negatively, and she has really grown, and I think we need to give her credit for growing into quite a performer, quite a leader of the faction that she has right now over in NXT. She went back to NXT, it took a step back to take 2 steps forward, and that was reinventing herself, and now we have Mandy Rose as your NXT champion for more than a year at this point. So kudos and credit to where it's due. Mandy Rose is my performer of the week. And with that, we're going to end on the match of the week. And that does come from Crown Jewel. I think that should come as no surprise based on my review. Go see that Bianca Belair match. Bianca and Bayley, kudos to them for having the match of not just the night in Crown Jewel and Saudi Arabia, but my match of the week. And with that, folks, you can see the scroll going down across the bottom of the screen on our upcoming episodes. We have shows throughout the rest of November for you here, including one next week where I may not be able to make it. And so this is the challenge to Doug because he has had ample opportunity to know this was coming. So if he's not aware he's doing a solo show, hold his feet to the fire. He might be doing a solo show. I'm not 100% sure I will not be here next Sunday night. I will try to make it if I can. If not, you are in good hands. Okay. You're in adequate hands with Doug, and he will be doing surely a topic he can handle on his own. He'll be talking AEW, which is something he loves to do, something he's probably doing right now, mumbling into the mirror or wherever it is that he is this week after the Logan Paul loss. But we will be talking next week, full gear, giving you a preview as we do here on the Two Bros Wrestling Show when we have pay-per-views happening, and there's a lot happening through the rest of November. So you stick here with us Sundays at 8 o'clock, and we will keep you informed with everything it is that you need to know. With that, it's a whole lot of me, and I'm going to say for tonight, thanks everyone for joining us. If you haven't watched the Two Bros Wrestling Show before, be sure to subscribe and like and join us live 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Facebook and then on demand on both our Facebook channel as well as our YouTube channels. I'm Kevin, and for Doug, good night, everybody.